So I have a block set up today. It's the top of a post that I found that's very rotted. You can see all the loose debris inside. We're going to pour the re-rot into that, petrify it all. Not going to have to take any of this loose stuff out. But this post is very rotted, cracks all down the sides. So we're going to show you how to deal with all that. And on a day such as today where it's very hot, we're going to show you what can happen if it builds up exotherm, which is the heat that's built up as the epoxy cures. But we'll get on this and make a mix, put it in there, and we'll see what happens. What you want to do is just maybe take some painter's tape and cover up the holes so that the epoxy stays inside there. It won't matter if it sticks to the tape. You're gonna sand all that off once it's done. So re-rot is mixed 2 to 1. For this application, we're gonna do 4 ounces of resin and 2 ounces of hardener. So you want to mix very thoroughly. A day like today, 30-45 seconds will work because it's 90 or 95 degrees out here. And the product's very thin. It's going to cure very quickly. The wood fibers that are down in there are solid. Pour a little bit on top. And for this application, it might be good to have a little brush to brush it around, get it covered good. You see that smoke? That's how hot the epoxy gets. Don't be alarmed though. You might be a little freaked out when you first see that, but all that is the epoxy building an exotherm, especially on a day like today when it's this hot outside and the epoxy's hot. It'll smoke and boil a little bit and get really hot, but then it'll cool down. But I promise you, it will not catch on fire. But I wanted you to see this because this is worst case scenario of how hot the epoxy can get in the middle of the summertime and you're pouring a really thick volume of epoxy into a cavity. But this is what you'll get. The good thing about this is that it will dry very, very fast because the warmer epoxy is, the faster that it dries. And you can pour the next coat, which is the filler coat with the wood flour, right on top of this even before it's dried. And that hot epoxy will help dry the wood filler a little faster. Okay, just use the old coffee can here. Pouring the mixed epoxy in the coffee can, then we're going to pour the wood flour into that. Okay, so we used about 3 ounces of epoxy and we're going to use about 3 ounces of wood flour to make the filler. Just measure out into the cup, about 3 ounces. Pour that into the mixed epoxy and mix that up. We're going to make our filler. Mix that up thoroughly. We're putting the filler on top of hot epoxy liquid, and my guess is that the filler is going to rise because of how hot the epoxy is underneath and how hot it is today. So I'm not going to quite fill this up. Try to save some of this, not use so much, and we'll see if it exotherms and if the filler swells up. So you see what's happening with the filler because that's so hot underneath. That's why I did not fill the hole up all the way. I'm gonna use this to my advantage and let the heat help build some volume. And then as it comes up, I can just spread it. Smooth it out as it builds. Put the spatula on top of it. That's going to force that filler into any other cracks and crevices from the pressure that's put on there. That should work great. After this wood filler coat has dried, it's going to be very hard, so you're going to want to sand it with a very coarse grade of sandpaper, like at least a 40 grit. If you see that the surface is still not as smooth as you would like, then just simply mix up some more epoxy, and add a little bit of wood filler to that to make more of a slurry, and use a spatula to apply that. Or you can make a mix of just the liquid epoxy and brush that on. Sometimes you need a moldable putty for things like rebuilding profiles. Then simply take some of the epoxy wood flour mix, add a little more wood flour until you get a neat little putty ball. This is also great for filling nail holes.